The White Bear Lake League of Women Voters welcomes you to this virtual forum for candidates in the November election for White Bear Township Supervisor. This forum is being recorded by SCC and will be available on the White Bear Lake Area League of Women Voters YouTube channel. My name is Liz Nordling, and I will be moderating this forum tonight. I do not live in White Bear Township. As a trusted volunteer organization, the League of Women Voters does not support or oppose political parties or candidates. We sponsor forums like this to provide voters an opportunity to hear candidates' views about issues of interest in the upcoming election. All candidates were invited to participate, and the candidate participating tonight is Scott McEwen. There is another candidate. His name is Ron Den, and he declined our invitation. And because we just have Scott with us tonight, we will be doing this as a conversation. Well, I will be asking him questions that we have compiled from Township residents, and we will not be timing him, so we're going to just start with question number 1, which is, the town board's responsibility is to provide residents, businesses, and visitors with reliable, equitable, and high-quality municipal services while serving as open, inclusive, and responsible stewards of the public trust. What initiatives would you push for?
Well, first I'd like to say thank you for hosting tonight's event. I do know it's just me and there's a lot of time and effort that goes behind this, but I did want to say thank you. The effort that I push is traditionally looking at long-term benefits to the township. Whatever we're doing, what's going to be, I'll say, the payback over a 5-10-year period or longer. And that's what we have taken a very thoughtful approach on over the past few years to make sure that all residents are comfortable in the community. Pavement management plan is one example. It's a 10-year project to go through every road that the township owns and make sure that it is kept up to date and filled in and upgraded. That's just one example of how we try to make it a welcoming, comfortable community for the residents.
Thank you. What are your ideas to increase township revenues and/or decrease township expenses?
That's always a wonderful topic. We have that frequently, and I wind up asking a lot of questions about finances. I probably drive the finance director a little nutty sometimes. The idea of cutting expenses is always right there. It's always easy to say, let's not spend money on this, that, or the other thing. We have to balance that with what I just mentioned, the long-term payback. Sometimes, I'll just use the example of car maintenance. You got to change the oil and rotate the tires, and then once in a while tune up the engine or change the spark plugs and so on. Otherwise, down the road, the car just won't function. And we try to keep that philosophy with all the equipment in the buildings that we do maintain. That said, we are actively attempting various ways of getting more revenue. It's not just taxing the citizens, although that is one of the largest revenue sources, but there's also some other areas that the township just hasn't qualified for. You're going to hear the term local government aid. The township does not qualify for that. Some of our neighboring communities get significant funding from that area, and that helps offset some of the expenses that we are running into on a regular basis. We continue to push for that, as well as some of the franchise fees that are allowed with neighboring communities, but not the township.
Well, how would you balance the short and long-term goals of the community?
It's always a great conversation to have. We have some very, I will say, robust conversations among, well, the group. It's the 3 board members, the city clerk, the clerk treasurer, the finance officer, the public works director. We go back and forth a lot, and it's always a very fine balancing act. It's hard to say because we need to ensure that our roads are maintained, our equipment is functioning, and the buildings are also functional. But how do we make sure that we can afford it in the short term and not in the long term? What we wind up doing is, I guess when we're projecting the next year's budget, we are conservative on our revenue estimates and not excessive, but we push harder on the expenses so that we think we're going to get less and we're going to have higher expenses, and that kind of makes us think we got to watch that very carefully. And through careful management of getting quotes that we thought might be higher, but we're actually able to get good quotes for work, the end of each year for the past several years, we've had a small surplus, which then goes to help offset the following year's budget.
Now I have a couple of questions directly from Township residents. You'll be able to tell in an instant. What kind of assistance would you recommend the Township provide residents in dealing with the disruption from the coming construction at County Road J and 35E to add traffic circles and new exit and entrance ramps?
We have had several conversations with Ramsey County and the state of Minnesota and the other counties and cities involved. That's a juncture of different counties and municipalities and private businesses. And there is a lot of feedback. I know that the project manager has had a great outreach in that you could go to a website and look at the different options and vote on it. And I think they've narrowed it down from 8 down to 4. And they're still providing feedback. The assistance I would suggest to residents is go to those websites and vote on these, because if you're going to be driving that on a regular basis, provide your feedback now. They're still in the planning phase, and they have not yet come up with revenue for the actual construction. It's still trying to figure out what's the best position to take or the best plan to adopt. There is obviously a great need. If you've ever driven by there in the late afternoon and you've seen the backup of traffic, they've taken some steps to make it easier to get around, but still it can be dangerous at certain times in the morning coming south and in the evening going north.
So here's a question about water.
Yeah.
Since we're in the middle of a drought, what should the Township do to respond to water restrictions mandated by courts due to the dropping water level in White Bear Lake?
We have to take a very proactive approach on this. We have a lot of conversations, a lot of very strong conversations. There is a utility commission that the Township has made up of residents, and this is a topic that has got to be squarely addressed and then communicated to residents. The past couple years, we've had droughts in the late summer. People water because they want to see green grass. Nobody wants to see their landscape dry up. At the same time, we have to be very mindful of potential impact from the legislation, from the judicial decisions. And it's one of these balancing acts once again, but we have to get in front of that, communicate to residents that there are certain strictures that we have to, or mandates that we have to follow, and that means we may have to enforce things that people are going to be unhappy about. And it's in the interest of conserving water and following the judgment.
How would you evaluate the parks and trails in the Township?
The parks and trails is something that we have to come up with other revenue sources for. We are almost completely built out, and traditionally with new developments, developers will pay a park, some kind of a park dedication fee. And that goes to creating a green space and landscaping it, maybe putting in some equipment and so on. We're almost completely built out, and that is going away, which means we have these parks that we need to make sure are maintained well. We have spent some fairly significant money upgrading equipment, playground equipment, or trees and grasses in the different parks. And again, that's something that is great for the quality of life. I know people enjoy it. It doesn't come cheaply, especially with some of the playground equipment. So how we're addressing it is trying to come up with additional revenue sources. I mentioned earlier, we're looking at trying to increase the revenue stream, and some of that would be addressed to Parks and Recreation.
Here's a topic on everyone's mind these days. What gun control measures would you promote in the Township?
Gun control is something that I don't think the Township can mandate. This is something that we would certainly be in coordination with what Ramsey County sheriffs are recommending. I think that it's an extremely personal choice, especially when you have a lot of people that hunt. I've got neighbors that every fall they disappear for a few weeks to go hunt for grouse or deer or whatever. And that is something that's ingrained in Minnesotans. I'm not originally from Minnesota, but I've come to learn that fishing and hunting are big things. So as far as guns go, I think it would be extremely hard for the township to set any precedent when the county or the state are not doing that first. So we would certainly follow any leads. I would be hesitant to strike out in a new direction.
As a member of a 3-person board serving both the executive and legislative function of government, how would you work with and utilize the recommendations of your fellow supervisors? This is a 3-supervised board.
It
3
is.
Supervisors.
And I have found over the past 4 years that they have strengths that I do not, and I have some strengths that they perhaps do not have as much as. Each one tends to gravitate to what they do best, and I learn a lot. I like to think that they have learned a few things from my perspectives as well. I ask a lot of questions, and more often than not, after a certain point of time, the answer will be, well, we hadn't thought of that before. We got to think about that. So it's playing off one another. I shouldn't say play off. I really think we complement each other's strengths, and I really appreciate the experience that they bring to the position because I hope to continue learning from them for the next 4 years.
Thank you. Suppose a new resolution is on the agenda for the next board meeting. It is asking for some money for a new service for the citizens. How do you decide which way to vote?
One of the first things that we do is typically if residents are asking for a particular service, we will refer it to one of our resident committees. There's the Utility Board, Economic Development Advisory, Public Safety, Planning. We like, in Parks and Recreation, we like to have those committees vet the request first because it's made up of residents. And there's usually more of them than the 3 of us. And they can go back and forth and look at the nuances and maybe dig into it deeper to come up with a recommendation and their thought process on providing the recommendation. I certainly would I shouldn't say defer, but I certainly would look forward to learning about any input from the Planning Commission on a new idea or Parks and Recreation and find out how they are thinking about things before I would decide yay or nay on any request.
Give some examples of how you've been able to work productively with those who you do not share your opinion.
I found that we have the same end game in mind. We're the folks that I'm working with at the township, both staff and board members, all want to see the township prosper. How we get there sometimes is a little different. Maybe somebody goes right and I go left, or you go this way or that way. But we have the same focus or goal that we want to achieve. And one of the things that I have tried to implement for years is keeping in mind that I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I should listen twice as much as I speak. And I learn that way. And there are times that I go into a particular conversation thinking I'm pretty sure I know how I feel, but I hear different points of view. I'm not afraid to change my view, although there have been those that say, well, I flip-flop. I don't think so. I think as I get more information, I assimilate it, and I make a decision based on the information I have at hand. If new information arises that makes sense, yes, I think that it works out to go along with that.
What programs or services would you like to see implemented or changed for the youth of the township?
Well, again, we mentioned Parks and Recreation earlier. One of our biggest assets would be Polar Lakes Park, where there are a lot of youth activities going on up there. And we would like to see more. We've had requests for some equipment or facilities to be built. We have recently put in new permanent restrooms in both the north part and the south part of the fields, which had been asked for quite a while. Again, they're pretty expensive to build. We also need to put in some ball field shelters for people that are at the baseball diamonds, but also a band shell would be helpful for actually having some kind of a cover. This would increase then, I think, the number of folks that want to leverage that place, use it, and that would involve youth activities, sports leagues, and so on.
And this is the final question I have, and it's on emerald ash borer. What kind of help would you suggest the township provide homeowners in dealing with the emerald ash borer, such as an arborist to give advice or group contract for tree removal, similar to what you do for trash?
I'm pretty sure that we have that in place now. This is one of the areas that I'm not strong in, is code enforcement and ordinance understanding. We have folks that are very skilled in that, and I would pick up the phone and call them first. I think we have some processes in place to help residents identify, try and mitigate, and ultimately, if it has to be taken down, what can they do instead? I'm going to have to defer that to the staff, though they're better suited for that answer.
And let's make the real final question being, what are your top 3 priorities if you are reelected?
3 priorities is continuing the fiscal management. I really dive into the numbers and make sure that do we have the revenue to support the wants and the needs. We have to make sure that we are maintaining our infrastructure, the water, the wastewater, the storm, the sewer, the buildings, the equipment. We have to make sure that we cover those, and that's a number 1 priority. Another one is just maintaining what I'm going to call quality of life, why people like to live in the township. A lot of it is maintaining some of that infrastructure in the parks and making it a safe environment by partnering with both Ramsey County Sheriff and White Bear Lake Fire Departments to make sure that residents can feel that the response times are good. And the final one would be encouraging community involvement. Township governance is a bit different than a typical city. The residents actually set the budget each year by voting at our annual meeting as to whether or not it's going to be accepted, which is a learning process. We have to educate people. We've got 11,000 residents in the city, in the township. Wow. We've got 11,000 residents, but at our annual meeting, we may have 50 people show up. And at the budget presentation, less than that. I guess on the one hand, people are not wound up. I would like to say no news is good news. I would like to get more input because having diverse perspectives, different people that think not along my side, along my line of thought, has helped me grow more as a person. And I really would encourage people to get involved with the Parks Committee, the Public Safety, the utility commissions, and be a part of your community.
Thank you. I'll give you an opportunity to do a short closing statement.
I would like to once again thank you all for actually putting this on tonight. Again, I know that there's a lot of work behind the scenes, so I appreciate that. I have really enjoyed myself the past 4 years on the board. This is not something that I actively sought, and I kind of came into it late in life. I enjoy the community. As I said, I'm not from originally Minnesota, but my wife and I have lived here now 25 years and really wanted to continue giving back, to give back to the community that we enjoy. And this has been something I've enjoyed doing. I hope that some of my perspectives and thoughts have helped in that regard, and I'd like to continue for another 4 years.
Thank you. The League thanks the candidate for his participation, SCC for taping, our League volunteers, and you, the audience, for your attendance and interest. Let your voice be heard. Vote by November 8th. Thank you.